Hello, good evening. It's evening for me. My name's Leo Burtin, if we haven't met before. I have now run a few workshops with Suffolk Art Link over the last few years, and unfortunately the current circumstances meant that my session had to happen online. So with Kasia and the team at Suffolk Art Link, we decided that I would produce this short video for those of you who couldn't attend the workshop when we did it online, or for those of you who might want to try making the food that we prepared again at home and wanted the ability to kind of pause and linger on some of the explanations. In the workshop that we had together, I showed you how to make a dish from the south of France called Panisse, as well as an accompanying sauce which has a mayonnaise base. So in this video you'll also learn how to make mayonnaise if you don't know how to make that already, and you'll learn how to make a vegan alternative. But as well as the food, what really interests me in my practice as an artist chef is to bring creative thinking, creative practice together with cooking and eating with other people. So in particular, what I've been interested in exploring together in this session is the notion of cooking with the senses. So even though I will share recipes with you over the course of this video, and I will show you how to make this dish, panisse, and the accompanying sauce, I'd really encourage you to think with all 5 of your senses as you're making it. Think about how the different ingredients, the different elements of technique that we're going to employ feel for you, and really be alert to all 5 of your senses. There's a quote in this brilliant book by Tom Eagle, which is called First Catch, which I really recommend you read if you haven't already, that I really love, so I'll just read it to you. The thing to do is just begin. The question, of course, is where. We think of recipes as more or less scientific sets of instructions, little closed systems that start with an onion and finish at once, when in fact they are more like short stories about history, about politics, and about love, with obscure morals told in a curious imperative. Every order given to dice this or simmer that has within it a memory. I diced this so that we could eat together. I simmered that to keep away the cold. I really love this idea that each recipe is less than a set of instructions, or rather it's more than a set of instructions. It's about how whoever is sharing the recipe has come to that point. So I'd really like to encourage you to think about that as you're cooking, as you're trying out making panisse, playing with the different flavors that you may add or take away with the recipes that we're making together today. I'll pop over again at the end of the video with a short invitation to participate in a bit of creative writing, which might go together with the food that you'll be making. See you soon. To make panisse, you will need the following ingredients. First of all, the star of the show, you will need about 150 grams approximately of chickpea flour that you have here in the middle. When you buy it, it'll often have little clumps in the packet, so I would recommend that you sift it prior to starting. You will also need a glug of good quality olive oil, extra virgin ideally. An oil of your choice could work also. A clove of garlic, which you can omit if you would rather not have a little hint of garlic taste in the panisse. You could very easily replace it with a bay leaf or other spices once you start experimenting. Some good quality sea salt, and about 300 milliliters of boiling water, which you could also replace, of course, with a vegetable stock. To start making panisse, bring to a gentle boil 500 milliliter of water, just a little over a pint, 500 ml, together with the clove of garlic for taste and a generous pinch of salt for seasoning. Once the water has come to a boil, you can fish out your clove of garlic and put instead about a tablespoon's worth of good quality olive oil. Then off fire. You will be able to slowly begin pouring the chickpea flour. And once all of the chickpea flour has been incorporated, you can bring it back on the heat on a very, very low flame and continue cooking it through. Now you will know when it's ready when it starts feeling a little like a choux pastry, a really, really thick custard maybe. You'll start feeling some resistance, and here at the bottom of the pan you will see that it's starting to attach to the bottom without sticking quite yet. And that's what you're looking for this panisse mix here. Now at that point you can take it off the fire, and if your mix is smooth enough, like the one that I've just made now, you're ready for the next step. Or if you still find that there are some clumps, that it's not quite as even as you'd like it to be, you could go in with an immersion blender and mix it through to get rid of some of these bigger clumps of chickpea flour that you have left. For this next step, I am using a brownie tin, which is 15 centimeters by 15 centimeters, which I've covered with cling film. You could use oil or butter instead. The cling film is just there to help us with the demolding process later on. And to this mold, you are simply going to come in and pour your panisse batter. Then, using a piece of parchment paper, you can begin to push it into the mold in order to create a more or less even base. To begin making the sauce that will accompany our panisse, we want a base of mayonnaise. Of course, you could simply make the sauce that I will show you how to make with chopboard mayo if you wanted to. But I thought I would take some time in today's video to make homemade mayonnaise. First of all, because you know what goes in it, you can adjust the flavor with how you see fit into your taste. And most importantly, I thought it was a brilliant example of cooking with your senses, because even though I can tell you that this is about 250 milliliters of oil, of sunflower oil in this case, that this is 1 egg yolk, we're going to put about a teaspoon of Dijon mustard in our mayonnaise. Actually, the process of bringing it together may mean that we have to adjust some of these ingredients. How much oil our yolk can take will very much depend on the particular egg, and how much oil we have to put in will depend on the kind of oil you're using, how fast you're beating this. So I thought it would be really interesting to include the making of mayo, a very simple emulsion-based sauce, in today's video. So, to begin with, we'll need an egg yolk. There's a little bit of white left there. It's not going to matter very much. Want to season it. Very generous pinch of salt. And a teaspoon of Dijon mustard. And then we're going to go in drop by drop with our oil. Once you've got a more or less stable emulsion like we're starting to have here, that is kind of thick and whitening, you can start being a little bit more generous with how much oil you're including, but still go little by little so that you don't have too much risk of it splitting. So of course you could use an electric whisk to do this, or even a stick blender, but what you'd want to be really careful of if you do that is to make sure that you start on a very low speed, so that the heat that's being caused by the blades or the whisk doesn't cause your egg to scramble effectively. So you will definitely feel when it's ready, both in terms of the consistency that you can look at and also in your hands. It's going to start becoming a little stiffer. And here's the final result. A gorgeous bowl of homemade mayonnaise, which will form the basis of our white sauce, which I'll show you to make in just a moment. For the vegan version of the mayonnaise, as you can see, a lot of the ingredients will be very similar to the ones that we used in the non-vegan version of the mayonnaise. And the main replacement for the egg yolk that we're going to have today is this lovely looking concoction here, which is called aquafaba, and it's the cooking liquid that you find inside of a tin of chickpeas. This amount is about what you get in a tin of chickpeas of this size, and this is going to provide us with the protein that we need to create the emulsion for our sauce. Okay, so let's get going. So first we need to create a base with a little bit of mustard. Dijon mustard is my favorite. You want about 2 teaspoons of this there. And as with the standard mayonnaise, the mustard, as well as bringing flavor, will help us with the lecithin that it contains in creating the emulsion that we're making today. Then you'll want a little bit of white wine vinegar, about a tablespoon's worth. You could use another vinegar actually if you preferred the flavor of other vinegars. I find that white wine tends to be the more kind of discreet in these kinds of sauces. And then to begin with, you'll want to go in with about 4 tablespoons of this chickpea liquid and create a sort of split paste. At the bottom of your container. Season it with a very generous pinch of salt. You can always adjust the salt later on. And then you're going to go in with a stick blender and gradually pour in the oil. And as you can see already, in a matter of seconds, with the stick blender, it's already created a very kind of creamy and very mayonnaise-like sauce. So at this point, if that texture is you're happy with, you could stop there. I'm just going to take it a little bit further. There we go. I think I'm happy with this kind of texture. Kind of coats the back of the spoon really easily. Really nice and silky. To prepare the sauce which will accompany your panisse, you will need 25 grams of mayonnaise. Here I am using the vegan alternative which we preferred earlier, a finely diced small shallot, a crushed clove of garlic, about 100 grams of Greek yogurt or a vegan alternative if you'd prefer, and a handful of finely chopped fresh herbs of your choice. Here I have some mint, some basil and some curly leaf parsley. Quite simply, you just want to bring everything together by mixing it in. You'll want to add a little bit of olive oil, some salt. I really like to go in with a little bit of Paul Biber, this really fatty, really aromatic chili, also known as Aleppo flakes. And that's all there is to it. You could also add a squeeze of lemon if you wanted to have a slightly more acidic version of this white sauce to accompany your panisse. After resting for a couple of hours in the fridge, our panisse is now a solid block that was very easily demoldable, and we are now ready to cut it into strips that we are then gonna go ahead and fry. So you can cut it into all sorts of shapes. I really like this kind of chunky chip sort of style. But of course, feel free to cut it into whatever shape tickles your fancy on the day that you are making it. Hello again, I hope you've enjoyed the video and I hope that you'll enjoy trying panisse once you've made it. As I promised earlier, I thought I'd come back here at the end to offer you a few creative writing prompts. It's just an invitation for you to really consider your senses once again when you're cooking. The exercise is very simple. I'd like you to pick up an ingredient anywhere in your house, or if you're not at home watching this, you might think of an ingredient. It could be a fruit, vegetable, any other ingredient. And what I'd like you to do is spend some time really considering each of your senses, starting with sight. What can you see of this ingredient? What color is it? What shape is it? Really think about what you see. Then we'd move on to the sense of touch. What does this ingredient feel like? What does it feel like on your skin? What does it feel like maybe when you touch it with your teeth rather than your hands? Then we move on to smell. What does it smell like? What does it smell like at one end of the ingredient? Does it smell different at the other end of it? Does it smell different after you've bitten into it? What does it sound like? What does it sound like when you flick it? What does it sound like when you scratch it? What does it sound like when you eat it, of course? And finally, what does it taste like? What are the kind of sensations you get on your tongue? What kind of flavors does it remind you of? And in the process of writing from each of those senses, can you come up with any metaphors? Do any of the senses in relation to this ingredient remind you of anything? Are there any stories connected to each of those senses or that ingredient? Just a little bit of food for thought as we end our session today, as we end this little video workshop. I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed making it. It's the first time I've done something like this, so I'd really like to say thank you to Suffolk Art Link for giving me the opportunity to try this mode out. All the ingredient lists and the notes on the recipes will also be available on Suffolk Art Link's website. And if you have any other questions, feel free to get in touch and I'll be back.